다른 가서 저게 가자 세디다 뭐였어야다 되네 저게 다음에 봐 간에스담 당고래 세디게 된지게 삼다 되네 디토냐 저게 다 세디 저기 로라 나와 나신 공부하다 아니 차시 뢰파 샤발라 떼 샤발라 마디바 랑원데 두바 나와 나신지 다 두다 민두세네 내 풍봉에 된도 가와 두신의 삼다 제바지야다 두신의 삼다라니까 가상한테 디고 쉬르바.
Good morning. Last night we looked at the need to recognize the object of negation, or come to identify the object of negation, true existence. And thereafter we looked at how, in order to realize the emptiness, or to negate the object of negation, to realize the emptiness of true existence, the best technique is to do so through the presentation of dependent arising. And then in the meditation, the starting point is to see how the self appears, to identify then the object of negation and seek it out. Look for this truly existent self, coming to recognize that the self does not exist in the way that it appears.
ngô chi năng người chuyện cái đấy chi năng anh rồi liền năng rồi cái đấy năng rồi thế này càng lại mà được ba luyện phá xả ba lại mà được ba ràng người này chủ tuyệt cái gì còn ràng người chủ tuyệt năng rồi đấy đi năng anh xin chỉ đến chỉ năng suy đi nên đạt được chủ ba cái sao đạt được chủ ba sẽ đi đạt được chủ ba sẽ đi ra cả giá sẽ đi đấy mà tu cả giá mà suy đi 데 나와나 신기 뢰파 어다가라 제 선배 진바디다 맞게 덴세시오로 어디 디시고로 와다가서 가산디 가자세디 다도 주바 덴바 주바세디 가르스네 로로 최가리 나베나 갈라에 마되바 뢰파 샤발라 마되바 랑응원이 주티베 능고레스 디 나와나 신지 여바나 데니기 나수 여바데라 데니치질라 아네 덴바 주바스 said the security gacha dire gacha di just di na shen da ra yore some jimba ina di jimbi lo de le densen sigri sa ga zu kasa di ko shirwa.
Furthermore, it was mentioned that every object that appears to mind, so everything that is an object of thought, whether it's an external form that one sees or hears or tastes, for example, or something that one thinks about, these all appear to mind, and they all appear as being truly existent. So every object of thought appears as truly existent. And true existence itself is the object that is to be negated or refuted. And the meaning of true existence is that the object appears to be independent. It will exist independently, not influenced or impacted by anything at all, not requiring imputation by mind in order to exist. This is the meaning of true existence. So any phenomenon that one thinks of, any object of thought, it appears to us as being truly existent, as being independent, not being requiring parts or causes or imputation by mind. And this object of negation, true existence, needs to be recognized, because without identifying the object of negation, true existence, one will not know what it is that one has to refute. So therefore, identification is imperative. Thereafter, one recognizes that it's not just that true existence, object of negation, appears, but a consciousness grasps at it, believing that this is how the object exists. And this is the ignorance of true grasping.
지상 가사디 나서 나와나 신 아니 강래 마도 랑원이 주바 레베스네 디 마레스 가선 가사 세팅한 주 가사 요르디 디 규된 견을 뛰어바래 파르 샤파라 뛰어바레스 샬레 뛰고로 와스 지나다랑 덴디기 가사디 당아주 마주 가사디 강라에 마도 랑원이 주바 디 모르 마주바레다 마주바레 델 마주바델 가사 다음에 발래 그래
A term I briefly mentioned last night, and we will look at in a little bit more detail now, is the term selflessness of persons. Selflessness of persons then refers to the person or the self that appears to be truly existent. It appears to be independent of causes and parts and imputation by mind. That's how it appears. But when one seeks such an independent self or truly existent self, it cannot be found. So one cannot find such a self. And then one realizes the emptiness of true existence in relation to the self, and this is called the selflessness of persons. Because what one is seeking is does the self exist in the way that it appears, independent of anything at all? And one comes to recognize no such truly existent self exists, and therefore it is empty of existing in this way, empty of existing truly, empty of existing in the way that it appears. And this realization is the realization of the selflessness of persons, because the object is the person, and one realizes thereafter that not only is the self not independent, but rather it is dependent, dependent on causes and conditions, dependent on imputation by mind.
아디네기 망간주 가사디 맞아 나이데 가사 나이데 강라이마도 랑무도 주바 나와 나신 가사디 디네기 강라이마 랑무도 주바 레스 미진바딜라 가사케 다진라 고르바다 가사케 다진스
The term grasping at true existence in relation to the person, then, is where the person appears to consciousness as being truly existent, and then another consciousness grasps at it as existing truly. So this grasps at the person as existing in the way that it appears, in other words, as truly existent, as independent.
다 강사래 셴방아 저 풍보다 아니 풍보 강사래 셴비 풍보다 치유모보 나다 셰지기 최간의 지미네 당아저 변의 풍보를 따바이나 풍보를 샤바이나 강사래 마인 강사 마인기 풍보라 소바나 안치루비 모보라서 가리네 대대는 대수 차상 나요도 가서 나요도 가르는 거라서네 대수 차상 나요도 직발이다 강라에 마되바 뢰샤발라 마되바 랑응은이 두바 nen고래 디데마두바 나수티제 디나신 나와나신 다가라 레 선배 삼로디다 취기 다신라고 될래야 취기 다신스 유디 강사래 셴비 유 풍보나라 치 가르신 취 가르니
That then was a brief presentation on the selflessness of persons, and what grasps that the person as being truly existent is a consciousness, an ignorance, consciousness of ignorance, that is called self-grasping. There is another type of selflessness, the selflessness of phenomena. And here one doesn't use the term self-grasping, but uses the term true grasping. The meaning of these two terms, self-grasping and true grasping, is the same. The only difference is self-grasping is a consciousness that grasps at the self as being truly existent. True grasping grasps at any phenomenon other than the self as being truly existent. So the only difference is the object that is grasped at as being truly existent. In terms of the selflessness of persons, what one comes to realize is selflessness is the person. Here, one is investigating any phenomenon other than the person. So it could be the aggregates, or any individual thought or outer phenomenon. And here this too appears to the mind as being independent or truly existent. And one grasps at, one naturally or innately grasps at this object as existing in the way that it appears, truly existent. Then when one seeks and comes to find that the object does not exist in the way that it appears, one realizes the selflessness of phenomena. So previously, when the object was the self, and one realizes its emptiness, one realizes the selflessness of persons, and now when it's an object other than the self, one realizes the selflessness of phenomena. Again, then, one is investigating selflessness of phenomena. The object that one is seeking is an object other than the self, other than the person. When one is investigating the self or the person or the I, then one comes to realize the selflessness of persons. When the object is something other than the person, such as the aggregates, then one comes to realize, when one comes to realize that object doesn't exist in the way that it appears, doesn't exist independently or truly, one here comes to realize the selflessness of phenomena, realizing that despite the object appearing as being independent, it does not exist in this way. Rather, it is dependent on imputation and or dependent on causes and conditions.
Gansa dame na chugi dame kebar she dongshi chujin yukone kebar she gore gacha di dongshi chujin gansa ge tindo kape ge dongba de la na gansa dame es gacha dongshi chujin gacha dongsa jiorwa dongba jeba chi si jiorwa di shi go ne kebar she gore gansa dame na chugi dame se de jesa gacha de rangmun ni tuba de che di gacha di gari tindo ka go san gansa ge tindo ka be ge shi dongshi chujan shi gansa ge tindo ka be ge dongba ni de la gansa da me le go re na gacha di gansa le shen phungpo la so ba che shen ge tindo ka be ge dongba de la chu ge da me le go re jesa di gacha le kebar yo mare gasa ge shi de la dongshi chujan sa gasa ge shi le kebar yo mare ma to gacha le kebar yo mare che jesa di ne za da tenggi bulu la gansa dame da chugi dame ni la chara ke ba yo ma des.
According to the highest philosophical school, that of the Prasangika, the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena do not differ in terms of subtlety. One is not a more profound, realizing either of those types of selflessness, or amongst those two types of selflessness, one is not seen as a more profound realization than the other. This is because they both have the same object of negation, true existence or inherent existence, any of those synonyms. So both types of selflessness, that of persons and phenomena, have the same object of negation, true existence. The only difference is the basis of negation. For the selflessness of persons, one realizes that the person is empty of existing truly. And for the selflessness of phenomena, one realizes that any object other than the person is empty of existing truly. So the only difference between these two selflessnesses, that of persons and phenomena, is the basis of negation. The object of negation, true existence, does not differ, and therefore there is no a difference in subtlety between the realizations.
Jera mawa nang dode ba sede ki chuki dame sede killing go mare konzo kansa dame de la chamo da raba ni sene sha go ma do chuki dame killing go mare dang zo dene sem zamba da uma rangyu ba ni digi chuki dame da kansa dame ni killing go re ne da uma rangyu ba da sem zamba ni la chuki dame da kansa dame ni gacha kha ga de an chara khe ba yo re chuki dame de chamo re kansa dame de raba re 지나다 가자가에 가자대야 취기 담에게 가자디 참모래 차와래 차고래 가 취기 담에 세주로 디 가자디 차와 차고래 지상 취기 담에 호라 차와인자 디 가자디 참모 차고와 지나다 가사 담에디 다 취기 담에들이잖아 라바래 지상 디 가자디야 라바 차고 지나다 셈잠바도 우마랑규베니 제베나 가사 담에다 취기 담에니라 차라케 봐요라 가자라 케 봐요래 아니 가사 담에 다도 좀 다진다 취기 다진이라 켜봐요로 켜봐야 되래 샘 제라 마와도 되대반이라 다 취기 담에서 그렇게 홀링 거 말이야 제가 가사 담에는 취기 담에 켜봐셔요 막아서 취기 담에 킬링 거 말아 제가 텐주불라 취기 담에다 가사 담에니라 차라요 말 가자라 켜봐요 말해서 어디 켜봐요 뒤로
That's then the presentation of the supreme or the highest philosophical school in Buddhism, the Prasangika. But there are, of course, other philosophical schools. The Vaibhashika and Sarjantika, they do not even accept the selflessness of phenomena. Or to express that differently, they don't accept that phenomena lack a self. So they don't accept this at all. They only present or assert a coarse and subtle selflessness of persons. So this is the view of the Vaibhashika and Sarjantika schools. Then those above them, the Chittamatra and Svatantika Madhyamaka, they do accept both types of selflessness. So they do assert that the self is selfless and that phenomena too are selfless. However, they present a gradation in terms of the subtlety of the realization. They assert that the realization of the selflessness of persons is a coarser realization than the realization of the selflessness of phenomena, which is a subtler realization. And they do make this assertion because for them, the object of negation differs. So this is the case for the two schools, the Chittamatra and Svatantika Madhyamaka. They accept both selflessnesses, but they say the realization of the selflessness of phenomena has a subtle object of negation and is a subtler realization. Whereas the preceding two schools, Vaibhashika and Sarjantika, don't accept the selflessness of phenomena, only the selflessness of persons. And then the supreme school, the Prasangika Madhyamaka, as we've just looked at, they accept both the selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena and assert that they have the same object of negation. Unlike the Chittamatra and Svatantika, they don't say there are different objects of negation. And therefore, because the Prasangika say that the object of negation is true existence for both the selflessness of persons and phenomena, the realization of selflessness doesn't gradiate into subtle and coarse, independent on whether it's a selflessness of persons or phenomena that is realized.
가리고네 가사 담에다 추기 담에서 개발 샤야데 가르샤고스는 시 가사게 땡도 가자 가야데 까바데 가사 담에레 가사레 셴베 시기 땡도 풍보라 소베 땡도 가야기 가자데 까베 동바들레 네 가사 추기 담에라기 에서지 고 시기 땡도 가자 가사 시기 개발데 샤마도 가자레 개발샤고 말해서 지상 추기 담에다 가사 담에 개발 가르샤고스는 가자 가사게 시 가사게 땡도 까바이네 가사 담에 가사를 셴베팅도 가바에는 주기 담에지 가시 동시 추지게 되는 개발샤고 그러지. 근데 샘잠바다 우마란주바니기 시가시기 동시기 거는 개발샤고 말고 가자기 원래 개발샤고 gacha la chara yobaza gacha chara di shi gansa den do ga bai ne ben chu gi da du ba sia di shi gansa de do ga bai ne ne de le chu gi da me la go re se le shi gansa ge den do ga bai ne chu gi da me shi phung bo la gansa le shen phung bai den do ga bai ne chu gi da me je ra ma ran ju ba de sem za ba ni ge shi le khe ba ga shi东西嘎切个西来开把些个嘛，嘎切的个是嘎切，去给大都主把些的，西刚才点都搞不赢呢的，刚才来先别点都搞不赢呢的，今天搞不东巴的了，东巴你的了，去给大没是明白过来。嘎切去给大就了哇，这他们对的把它sem个是，我们让就把它sem这边开里边去给大，是可能嘎切就了哇，的那个嘎切的西刚才点都搞不赢呢的。西刚才来先碰不进的搞不赢的，今天搞不东北的了，去给大灭了个业绩。让就把它搞着，当不搞着的些。西刚才个点都搞不赢了，搞着进嘛都要嘛，搞新年了，怕。가서 삼는다서 제바제 신이로 와 대지 텐유변나 찍바로 다도 주머르세 가사기 때문에 제바네 시디 가사스로 와 가사 신 풍부이 때도 주머르 제바네 시디 풍부래 신 가사래 신비 최로 와 디나신의 텐유베디 셰로 와 대지 디나신의 제라마와던 가사 우마랑주바 셈자베니게야 가차 추기 다도 주바 코란즈게 가차 추기 다도 주바 세지 켈레야 주로 와디 다 간사게 때도 두고 민도 제바 데 시 간사게 때도 제바 지고래 다 간사래 신 풍보라서 버때도 두고 민도 제바에나 취기 때도 제바 지고래 다 되니게 가리 때도 제바 제네 간사지라 가차디 간사게 때도 마주바디야 취기 다메라 고래 풍보래 신비 간사래 신 풍보 때도 디 간사데 마주바데라야 취기 다메스미다 고래 제 가사라 다메니 라고 말해제 대지 가자디 디 가자로와 디 가사게 때도 까바나 민갈레 그래서네 취기 다메래 고래제 대지 텐주베 갈라서 가사 다메라서 취기 다메래 민도와 대자 라주비 그시 가사 때도 까송바나 민갈레 그래서네 가사 다메래 말해 취기 다메래 그래제 디네 가자디 시풍부에 때도 까나 안에 텐주비 취기 다메라서 디나신 제람 되게바다 가서 샘점바다 우마랑면 취기 담배래 그래서 제상 가차디 시 가사에 때도 까봐 있나야 될라 가사 담에 그 취기 담배래 그래지 디지다 텐주비데 삼다다 강라이마도 랑문의 두바디 가차로 와 디가사데 가사게 때도 주머를 제바 제제 마두바 또송 또바데 마두베 동아딜라 민갈라 그러서네 가사 담에로 와 되니게 가자디 가사래 신 풍부에 때도 주머를 제바치네 가사 풍부에 때는 마주바딜라 취기 담에라 그러마다 가사 담에라 그미도와 취기 담에라기도 와 대디하고서 디나지 지구지가래 랑주바다 샘점에 호랑지게 취기 다도 주바세 강라이마 랑응은이 주바세지 취기 다도 주바지 가사에 kiling으로 와 디네 가사디 취기 다디 가사디 가사게 때도 주머를 제바치네 가사 때도 마주바딜라 민갈라가 그러스니 취기 담에라 그래지 가사 시디 가사래 제바치세 시디 가사래 디때도 마주바딜라 민갈라 그러선 취기 담에라 그래서 대지 텐주비게 가사 담에라기도 와 란주바다 샘자반이 취기 담에라 그래서 난 데네 가자디 시풍보 때도 주마를 제바치네 풍보 때는 마주바셔로 데라야 취기 담에라 그래지 취기 란주비 시고 란주비기 가자디 가사 많이 뭐 풍부하다 가사래 신비 풍부 취가리 때도 제바치네 디마주바딜라 갈라고서네 취기 담에라 그래 제가 취기 담에 제가 풍부하다 가사 풍부래 신 강기 때도 까비게 동바딜라 민 아니 취기 담에서 샤고마도 델레 가시를 켜봐셔고 말이지 셈잠바도 오마라유 바디 나 가사 담에서디 가사 rak바직 다디 취기 담에마 가사 다 세디 코이 가자 rak바셔고 데네 가사 rak바디 다 가자 rak바디 Kansa ke tiento ka ba ina da kansa le shin phumpe de gari de ka ba ine de le min kansa da me le go le che. Je sa kansa le ke ba ji go le che.
So for the Prasangika, the supreme, the highest philosophical view, they accept both the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. So for them, the difference comes with the basis of negation. In other words, what the object is that is being investigated to see whether it exists truly or not. What doesn't differ for the Prasangika is the object of negation. In other words, whatever object is being investigated, it is being the same appearance, the same object is trying to be negated on whatever object is being investigated. So where the difference comes is if the object is either the self or anything other than the self, such as a consciousness or a form. That's where the difference comes, and this is the basis of negation. What doesn't differ between the one basis of negation, the self, and the other bases of negation, all other phenomena, is the object that is to be negated, true existence. So for Prasangika, there is no difference in terms of the object of negation. This remains the same no matter what is being investigated. The only difference is in the basis of negation. And if the basis of negation is the self, and when that is realized that it doesn't exist truly, then it is the selflessness of persons that is realized. When the basis of negation is a phenomenon other than the self, when that is realized to be empty of true existence, then it's the selflessness of phenomena that has been realized. But in both cases, the lack of true existence is what is realized, and therefore the object of negation is the same, as well as the subtlety of the realization. There is no difference in the subtlety of realization. This then is the case for the highest school, that of Prasangika. The two immediately below, the Chittamatra and Svatrantika, for them, it's quite different. So for them, the basis of negation, the object that is being investigated, this doesn't. This is not where they make the difference. For them, the object of negation is where the variation is found. So this then means that for the Chittamatra and Svatrantika schools, where there is a single object, for example, the self, one can realize both the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of persons in relation to the self or the person. In relation then to any other phenomenon, one can and should realize both the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of persons in relation to that object. So therefore, again, for the Chittamatra and Svatrantika, the object or the basis of negation, here this is not where they make the distinction. Rather, it's the object of negation that varies with the coarser object of negation leading to the realization of the selflessness of persons, whether the object is the person or a phenomenon other than the person. And the subtler realization is the selflessness of phenomena. And so here, the object of negation for the selflessness of phenomena is subtler. And that can be realized on any object, again, whether it's the person or whether it is phenomena. So to briefly recap that, for Prasangika, they make the differentiation between the basis of negation, the object that is investigated, not the object that is to be negated. So, for example, they'll differentiate between the self and the table, but both of them will be, the true existence will be sought and not found, and then the selflessness of persons or phenomena will be realized, and therefore there's no difference in terms of subtlety between these two realizations. for the two lower schools of Chittamatra and Svatantika, on any single object, whether the self or another phenomenon, both the subtler selflessness of phenomena and the coarser selflessness of persons can be realized on any phenomena. And therefore, they're making the Chittamatra and Svatantika are making the distinction in dependence on the differing objects of negation. Whereas for the Prasangika, the object of negation didn't vary, just the basis. Here it's the opposite. With the Chittamatra and Svatantika, the object of negation, this is what varies. The basis of negation, this doesn't. And therefore, on one object, you can the practitioner will strive to realize both subtle and coarse selflessness, or the selflessness of persons being the coarser, and the selflessness of phenomena being the subtler.
That didn't ma loina. That Kasange Judin ma Yang Mi Jurang Tona, Tongzam Yine, Mi Ju, Yudin the Yobatar Nayang, Dedar Tensha Jepiki, Shinsul, Tar Yubik, Abba Majings. And then Mi Ju Nane, Yunsen, Tarnang Mam, in the Yang Dapa, Kayan Washila Dene, Michigla, Sangando Topiki, Tsumi Yijige, Namdo, Yakekap, Muele Kaibiki, Sangando, Jotane, and Blue Jotane, Chatata, Yongwe, De Negaso, and Yongwe, De Negaso, and Yute, Dindendo, Lobune, Dambur Shembashi years.
Let's return to the text. We'll starting where we concluded last night, at the top of page 7. So at the top of page 7, also, when we see 10 people, just from merely seeing them, it appears to us that 10 people exist there. However, there is no certainty that we will cling to this appearance of 10 people and posit truth or realness to it. If we were to do so then, for either superficial or correct reasons, a discursive consciousness of improper mental engagement would be generated, considering one from amongst those 10 people as decent or depraved. At that time, our intellect will superimpose decency or depravity onto this person that exceeds what actually exists.
Kasa Shevana Je Tangzuke, that Dambo Arzuke, Michushi, Tongwane, Dambo Tongyo, then Michuja Tongana, Tongzam Yine, Michu Yuden, Yobar, Nayang, sir. Sazang Arzuke, you Michu, Jipat, Michu Tongwane, Dambo Tongyo, then Michu Arzu, Nai do Karnangors, and Korong when you droop the by Nangor, that Nayang says, Nangor, Carsandi, Le Kala Matabo, Le Shabala Matabo. Korongwene, Rangwene, Yudebaji, Anzolia, Nangores, denounce with Temperatuba, Temperatuba, Nangores, Nangores.
Last night, then, I introduced what the text covers here. So, taking the illustration, when we see a group of people, as the text mentions, say 10 people, what appears to our mind is this group of 10 people, and they appear as being truly existent.
And there didn't go there, and they didn't know I don't have some Nalaya, Densha Chibi, Shensu, you have never your mother said Densha. Demba Bennett, Densha, so the Chicina, Midi, Yawore, Sempi, some Lochita, Yana, Nambana, Nambare, Sempi, Denigi, Michudi, Tongo, Demba Juba, Nangor, the inner Anzolia. In the Yapo in the Yimba, Namba Yimbigi, Shensu, Trouble, Shin Dambudi Omares, Shen Densha, Jibi, Imba, Sembig, touch the Resembe, Shenbi, Shensu, Yubik, Neva Yomares. Since the Dematuba Nango, Reche, Nang by Yinayang, Nang Sudin, Nangor, the inner Carligors, di ngamba ina ngamba da sangpo ne sangpo di insha sha chepe samlo di ligi mare che de di sinki shiwa ma da chiza nangu ore se che bare da nangu ore che da nangu ore de ane di ngana jugi tsumi ji lo ke yo mare le go de nang yon de lam sa tsumi ji lo ki mare se go da di denba ina yin ba da den sha che de de ne mi sangpo ne ya go le sha san ba da bi dukja re sha san be samlo de lam sa ling mare ski mare che de min tong yo de ni ki mare wa de ki mare che
This a group of people appear to our consciousness as being truly existent. But what is not certain, so the second part of the sentence from however, what is not certain is that the consciousness of improper mental engagement will arise or not. In other words, it's not certain that one will look at this group of people or an individual amongst them and say, oh, this is a wonderful person, that's an awful person. That doesn't necessarily follow.
And then dene michu nane gymchen tarna kame yangda ba gangru shi la dene sero. And then michu tong de ga michu na le ya yana gymchen yangda ba yana gymchen tarna. Da gymchen yangda ba su de michu na de midi nyama labdra le dene stro bare. And go lobjong dene thwe bare. Se ding azu gymchen sam da yo ro thoram labdra le mas ne del stro bare. Chesan de cha dene ba thwe bare la dene ko lobjong yagoyo se shin yagoyo se be samlo ligi ro. Dan dele ya anda damchin ligi re ja ot be yagoyo da se be dene ki damchin de dene ki gymchen yangda ba sam da be ne dene tene ane ka so re dele ya anji damchin de ligi re se yongre dele tene yongre je yana mingan ba chi no do yana de bene gymchen yangda ba che da gymchen da na yin be ne ya ji mi chi gi 준시에요 와데 준무시에요 와다 이제도 곧 아직 이제 통화 되는 롭정을 퇴매가 안 되는 장화를 되는 퇴발에서 김전시도 김전 따나 김전 야다 봐 많이 봐 김전 따나 준무시에네 미고화 따데 미카시로 어디디 꼭 빼고서 선배가 삼로 담지들 리기로 봐 제가 그 연된 차네 셰바데 미들이 연된 미상불에서 해야지 봐이나 그 미상불에서 해야 돼 김전 야다 봐지를 때네 지금 암초도 그 김전 야다 봐삼 권에 될래 때네 그 야보레서 배 담지 숙체래야다 때네 김전 야다 봐 많이 김전 주머지를 때네 야 어느 곳에 야보레서 배게 상부 야보레서 배 삼로지 나 리기를 해야지 돼 주머로와 김전 따나 세례 김전 주머라.
Then continuing to the first bullet point, and I'm just going to change one word here in the first line. If we were to do so then, for either false or correct reasons, so not superficial, for either false or correct reasons, a discursive consciousness of improper mental engagement would be generated, considering one from amongst these 10 people as decent or depraved. So for improper mental engagement to arise, which exaggerates the characteristics of this group of people or an individual amongst them and sees them as either in an exaggerated way decent or depraved, this comes about independence on a reason. So this reason could be a correct reason or a false reason. And if this reason is, so the reason that leads to the arisal of the improper mental engagement can be either a correct reason, and therefore it would be correct to engage with them as decent or to relate to them as decent or depraved, or that reason could be wrong, and therefore they would not be decent or depraved despite appearing so.
Dinashi mi ngamba sedile mi chu thong dangbone ngambare sabe samli ligo ma chisa thongne da mi chigli ya gyumche ya da ba chi gone dele tene ko ngamba se bene ko mi dinane chigi da ngone rang ko karasene be kuma shu kya da mi so ya da dine duksha be joba ngambaro chigyo ba ina gyumche dine ngone ra chigyo ba ina nini gyumche de thonne ngone ya da ba thongje o ko be duksha re sembe ya damje shu chimbo le ya 야 김제 야도마 하나야 미션다 지 콜마가 지게 그 주마 쇠제 거디 지고라 거데네데 사제 데네기 김전 주마를 셰베나 데레 이셰제나 김전 주마들 삼다제 안지 안능아 저게 딩아바레 삼베 삼로 슈체레 용루와 제가 데네기 김전 양다 방원에 김전 양다 바질레 데네 외인이수 김전 임바 질레 데네 고 냠바레 삼베 냠바 삼다 지나 야 지금 외인이수 김전 메나 김전 주마 몽보 데네게 삼다제 근데 고걸 탭체 어느 콜이야 뱅간바레 SMP 삼로 담진도 슈체지 리기레 용고도 와서거든.
Whether either the group or an individual within the group, in dependence on a reason, improper mental engagement arises, seeing one of them as, for example, as depraved or as a bad person. So if that was a correct reason, one may know that an individual was a criminal and a repeat offender and certainly was not trustworthy, and one should be on one's guard around this individual. Or maybe one knows that this entire group is actually a criminal gang, and therefore one should be on one's guard. So here, this would be an illustration of a correct reason. A false reason would be the same reason, but it would be false. So one ends up deceiving oneself in that one believes that an individual or this group is a dishonest person or a dangerous person when they are not.
제가 당한주기 데디도와 찔라 상관도 또비 취미이지게 남도 야기에 값어도 다 취미이지게 양 각과 양 강로를 때네 양다바 강로를 실에 때네 미치라 상관도 또비 취미이지게 남도 야기에 값어도 제가 베네 김세 양다바 공원이랑 더름랍다 지기도 퇴야지 코로롭존 제야지야 약고지 여베이네 김전 될 때네 그 약고 지어봐 될 셀에 가와디 시오 지어래서 비게다 그런게 약고 될 셀에 가와지야 약고 따와네 이 수미지로 시루와다 제자다야 김제 상한 김정외에 수단 김제 때 야다바다 김제 야다 마인 바질에 미질이야 아직 공안바레서도 될 안바디 코로 셀에 가와지 지단 안바디 코로 괜히 차도여데 될 셀에 가와 괜 통통어도 안 될 데 다이도 디니보디다 가서 취미지를 놓아서 책으로 와. 제가 당보 미주디 통배네다 당보 통을 등한서 내주 가라고 뭐 지단 그 템버 주바 난거데 이내 가지고 디 가야 삼마제 다 디니바데 통에 디젤이야 다 김체지 고야지로 와데 야나 김체 야다 콜롭자 야고 열어서 김체 야다 봐주고 야나 김체 주마지 미지기 거의 열롭자 야고 열어 김체 주마시 시에바 내 고와를 때내 김체 데드 삼다네 아주 그런 야고를 생비기 다 야고 이버질에 체래 가와지 삼다바이나 니 주미지기로 해제 다 미지기 야가 당보통 미지기 디나 주나데 디 미두자 열다 해야돼 미지기 아니 가서 김체지 그 뭐냐랑 그런 김제 그 노트 제비 규모부 제비기 긴기 그야그 미두자에서 시작하다 야 미지기 주마시에 그 규제제 제비 주마에 시작하다 그 두자에 삼바다는 시작하는데 김제 될라디나 두자에서 그런 näm바지 지당 아주 미술이나 상비에 차대 näm베차 요요 버와 제가 näm베 차딜에 그 학바도 딜에 마 셀에 가비 näm바 삼다바이나 디 주미지 로서 제가 nga sangando tobe chumi namdo dene namdo de ya shukchese gigor ejere.
If we were to do so, then for either false or correct reasons, a discursive consciousness of improper mental engagement would be generated, considering one from amongst those 10 people as decent or depraved. So the starting point here, so first this group of people appear to one's consciousness as truly existent, then independent on either a false or correct reason, improper mental engagement arises. And this serves to embellish this reason. So if, for example, one sees this group of people or one amongst them as being someone trustworthy or someone reliable or someone that is a friend, that can be considered a friend, improper mental engagement serves to embellish that characteristic, exaggerate it within oneself. Similarly, if one sees one or that group or one amongst them as being untrustworthy, as being a potential threat, improper mental engagement takes that reason and embellishes it, exaggerates it. And thereafter one sees the person or the group as being more decent than they are or more depraved than they are. So the key characteristic of, or the key feature of improper mental engagement is that it embellishes the characteristic of the object.
Dinigi da namdo geji yondo kabla da namdo onga karligasine namdo geji kap nguyele kaywe sangandu le trotane chatan yongwe se chesa dinigi namdo geji dini nguyini sule kaywe ge sangboda ngamba dela dene ane chatan ki den ga sangbo dela mibi chakwa ngamba dela samtade dene ane dangwa kontra ki se che.
And this then is shown in the next sentence. At that time, our intellect will superimpose decency or depravity on that person that exceeds what actually exists. So that is what I just explained. And then the text continues. Attachment or anger will arise. So here we see that following improper mental engagement come the afflictions. So where the good qualities of the person have been exaggerated, then attachment is likely to arise. Where the faults of the person have been exaggerated, again, whether those faults arise from a correct or a false reason, those faults are exaggerated by the improper mental engagement, and then an affliction arises, such as anger. Attachment or anger will arise, and at that moment we'll cling to this object tightly from the depths of our heart as true.
An chatan kiwi kapso an dekaryong was yu di din du lo pugne dampor shenpa si yus. Jidida nga zule chatan chakwa kesa de pegi yu di nawa nashin resha san pegi zimbegi temzi chenpo jida. Dene ngambar sosu ke madyu bachi nawa diyago mindu san pegi damzi shuk chenpo ligo reshe. Shuk jedi le lo li di shungo reshe.
Just reading this bullet point again, attachment or anger will arise, and at that moment we will cling to this object tightly from the depths of our heart as absolutely true.
Na diso nganzugi du chine nganzugi lolo ya 간스 능구도 치네 이 지금 삼노다 망보라 지금 제바라 제제 하고 마도 셴 람사 하고 뒤에 색깔에 가오래도 아주 다 소수기 롤이야 나랑 간스 능구도 되네게 안진 당보 통에도 간스 통고래 된마 제리아 삼노 간스 리기도 안디 제리아 차단 리야도 로간스키 차단 기위 갑라 근데 유지래 차과지 기위 갑라 나주길래 삼노 간스 용구도 로 진나도 진나가래 차바 마기비 내가 빌래 로리아 진당 가다 용구도 주시네 다 심주신 마도 저 두신 망보라 삼단 마도 신 하고 되게 갈래 하고라 차이도.
This process then of every object of thought that it appears to us as truly existent, from this then may follow improper mental engagement, exaggerating the characteristics of the object, leading to the arisal of afflictions. This process takes a few moments to present, but to arise in the mind is almost invisible to us in that we have such habituation to it. It happens so very quickly and repeatedly with most objects that arise in mind, or many objects that arise in mind. Therefore, that without engaging in extensive analysis of our own inner workings, of our own mental process, we are not going to be aware that what objects are arising, let alone that they're arising as truly existent. Thereafter, independent on either false or correct reasons, we are exaggerating the characteristics of that object, and thereafter the afflictions arise. Most of that process arises unnoticed for us. And it's only through repeated investigation of a sustained period that we'll start to become aware of this.
Dena longan jiraji yang sura, longan jiraji yang sido lo, dua chao kondro ngaja, ta nyomo lo, dene ke ngambi rik, kana chi yimba ina yang su jiraji yang, di ngondro na dendang sido di pa denji ki lo na dendang. Den longan mangbo shik dang, tsungden nam ro su, denzin yongwa yimbi es, denzin yonggu res, denzin di yonggu res chere.
Moving to the next paragraph. Therefore, preceding and leading any harmful consciousness, so here we think of the afflictions, and assisting and accompanying many other harmful consciousnesses, is a consciousness grasping at true existence. Therefore, preceding and leading any harmful consciousness, preceding and bringing on harmful consciousnesses is the ignorance of grasping at true existence, or the ignorance of self-grasping. This is what starts the process. Therefore, preceding and leading any harmful consciousnesses. So this shows the starting point is the ignorance of self-grasping. And then the line continues, and assisting and accompanying many other harmful consciousnesses. Here, the ignorance of true grasping doesn't only play its role at the start of the sequence, but also accompanies the further arisal of afflicted consciousnesses, afflicted minds. Again, it's just saying then that we have here assisting and accompanying. So the meaning of these two terms here we can understand in the same way. So the ignorance of true grasping assists and accompanies other afflicted minds.
Tenzin marikpa de mena chadang so kesa mebe dedar imbese. Tenzin marikpa de mena chadang so kesa mebe dedar imbese.
Now again, let's just read the last part of that same sentence again. Is a consciousness grasping at true existence?
Chisanda tenzin mena 추미지게 남도 연구 말했어. 추미지 남도 메나 되샤다 혼론 기야요 말 녀모 기 말했어. 세상 계세요 말 기기 시호로 요 말했어. 그래서 기 유고로 메로 메반자다 고 기야요 기 말했어.
In this sentence then, the sequence is presented. From the ignorance of true grasping follows the improper mental engagement, and from this follow the afflicted minds. And the ignorance of true grasping not only is the initial cause, but accompanies and assists throughout this process. That is laid out here. Then the key point to understand is that this is a causal sequence. That from the cause of ignorance of true grasping follows the resultant improper mental engagement. With this as a cause follows the resultant afflicted minds. So as this is a causal sequence, should the cause be eradicated, the resultant minds will not arise.
마게 디 마게데 ngala 차비게 차바 마게 차바 미기 말니 데네게 다마 차다기 nga게 기 말해서 기 말와 디 마게 바이나는 당아주게 차다 마게 바이나 네 nga주게 샹래 강아 제야다 샹래 네베기에 가리고 무슨 차다고 차바다 당위 원기 네 샹래 네베기에다 강아 제야도 용고로와 지자 디네시데 nga리앙한 바사도 고로와 지자 차다 기면은 리앙한 바사야요 말해 리앙한 바사야 메데 리앙한 바마사나 코와를 기와래야 메데 지자 메와서 코와를 기와면은 아주 동안용어야 메데 지자 코비 그 풍보 수보디메 레다 녀모 풍보디메나 동규의 동아의 규의 동아 차와 두지 동아 숨보도 영화 매바래 진짜 매반자 진짜다 디네상 아주 코리 균 탐제를 줘야라 진짜 동반이도 또 오래 진짜 동반이 또 로디기 또 봐이나 차다 매바 수도 그래 대 매바 수도는 녀 코발기 레사도 말해 레 마사나 코발기 도 말해스 인상 아주 코발에 탈바이나 탈고 외바이나 다 코발에 탈바 제발라 동이 또 거야 레세 동이 되냐면 제고 그래서 그래
It's good then to get this causal sequence clear in one's mind. So first the sequence, and secondly the recognition that it's causal. Because if it's causal, by eradicating the cause, the resulting steps in the sequence will not follow. And to eradicate this causal sequence, one starts with the root cause, which is the ignorance of self-grasping. And through realizing emptiness, this is what one eradicates. So when one realizes emptiness or selflessness, then one will not give rise to self-grasping or the ignorance of self-grasping. And if there is no ignorance of self-grasping, that without that cause, there cannot be the resulting improper mental engagement. Without the improper mental engagement, there cannot be the affliction such as attachment to the I, because there was no ignorance grasping at the I as truly existent. And if there's no attachment at the I, there's not going to be any pride in relation to the I. There's not going to be any anger when others act in a way contrary to the wishes of ourselves. And therefore, no negative karma is going to be accumulated. Because negative karma, the accumulation of negative karma too, is resultant. It comes about in dependence on a cause, the cause being the afflicted minds. And again, those afflicted minds come about in dependence on a cause, improper mental engagement. This too is a result in that it comes from the cause, the ignorance of self-grasping. And if that has been eradicated through the realization of emptiness, the entire sequence is severed. And therefore, with no afflictions arising, no negative karmas accumulated, no causes to remain in cyclic existence are accumulated, and therefore, when one's purification, one's realization is deep enough, no suffering will be experienced, not the suffering of physical and mental pain, the suffering of transient pleasure, nor all-pervasive suffering. And this then is a reason that should be abundantly clear why we need to strive to realize emptiness.
가차 토마 메바네 동대 여 만용 외기 메바라 녜바로 모트에 녜시 끼고 봐 고바니 소
Then continuing in the text, just to say, the bullet points, the paragraphs and everything don't exist in the Tibetan, so it doesn't necessarily follow in the same way that we do. So continuing in the text, accordingly, the object of negation has never been found to exist and has been empty since beginningless time. Once we have made this identification, it is necessary to generate a conviction in it as well.
다 가셔야 세디 토마 메바네 요 말이죠. 주자와기는 요 말이스. 베네 가셔야 세디 베네 안 주기 메도 알아서 맞네. 즉 뒤갑질레기 한 뒤갑질레 매바 차려 연구로와 그러와 돈도이네 사지카실레기 사지카실레 매바라 연구로와 어디 나시 말에서 가샤세야데 자와 균에 나보니네 균에 위에 많이 와레스 마오바네 균에 영야요 마 지금마 영야요 말에서 요 말에서 자와기네 매니마 요 말에 마오바네 용 말에 다대 용 말에서 그러자 가샤세 토마 매바네 동디에서도 당은징아도 가샤세데 지디레다 로리아 파나도 유가리 나와네 강라야 마디어바 뢰파 샤발마 랑원이 줍되게 저러와 줍 디가자 디레다 데네기 줍되게디 토마 매바네 요 말에서 데네 요 말에서 마오바나 데네 용 말에서 싸우기네 데네 매바레스 데네 싸우기네 매바치레서 가자 토마 매바네 예 만용 와서 매발라스 매바레스 가자 토마 매바네 동대 예 만용 왜 매바스
Accordingly, the object of negation has never been found to exist and has been empty since beginningless time. So this is crucial because this is not how our everyday world exists, in that, as gardeners, you all know that in an empty piece of ground, the plant that you hope to grow there, right now, it doesn't exist. One has to plant that seed, and then it will grow. And later, once it's grown, being impermanent, it will eventually wither and die, and that little pot of soil will again become lack that plant. So we can see in our everyday life that there are things that were not there, then they've come about in dependence on the correct causes, and then they have ceased as well in dependence on those causes, and they are not to be found at all. But this is not how it works with the object of negation, true existence. True existence, as this line says, has never been found to exist and has been empty since beginningless time. In other words, since beginningless time, no one ever has validly found it to exist, has found true existence or inherent existence or an object existing by way of its own nature. No one has ever found this since beginningless time. And this is important because every object of thought appears to us as being truly existent. Yet, no object has ever existed truly, and true existence itself has never, ever existed.
매나야 가수 셈레 난고래 가수리 로리야 난고래 나와나시 가수 로리야 디나신 두 셈비 짐바 한기 용고래 용고로 와다.
The object of negation, true existence, doesn't exist at all. It has never ever existed. Yet, naturally, spontaneously, without any effort from our own side, it repeatedly, continuously almost, appears to consciousness, appears to our mind.
제가 데니기 매바딩 한줄 나와 난거래. 제가 나와 지금 저 하고고 말봐. 난그 여봐야 하고고 말해. 나와 나신지 난그 여봐다 하 먹어서 디지 나와 나신지 매바딩 하고고 말. 제가 가서 하고고 말디. 난그 여봐야 난그 여봐 하고고 말해. 나와 나신 매바딩 가서 하고고 말해.
The bizarre place we find ourselves in is that despite this being the case, we don't even recognize the arisal or the appearance of true existence to us at all. And not only do we not recognize its appearance, we don't recognize that phenomena do not exist in this way at all, despite naturally or spontaneously appearing to us as if they do.
제가 난그 여바데 하모거래 나와나 요래 심비 징기 여바 하모거래 하모거한자 디 요래 심비 짐바디 매바 쇠게 가서 탑실이 베 탑시 던거 말 가서 고 하고 요 말 하모거한자 디 괜히 바 하고 말에 그 될래 때는 녀모바 차상 중구 여바 하고 말 디 괜히 바 녀모베 자와인 바 가서 하모거래 마고데 고 괜히 바 하모거데 Then how more than on the Meba Soya and Tapshi Matanche and Dushin, Tadi Bardon, Dushin, Hayadi, Koala Koradi, Dikin.
Not recognizing, or first of all, not understanding what is meant by true existence. Secondly, not recognizing that every object of thought appears to us as being truly existent. And thirdly, not understanding that no phenomenon exists in this way despite all phenomena appearing to us as existing this way. It then is quite understandable that we make no effort to eliminate our grasping at true existence. We make no effort to even investigate how phenomena appear to us, and therefore, of course, don't investigate whether they exist in the way they appear or not.
ane hamogo ane neem de yo hamogo neem genji mishigi ba da hamogo ane del ya ngongo da men ngongo men suege jing mara ji ane ko gedi na du she hamogo za ko du she na ko gedi na neem de capche mi ma wo shi mutin droje ma do ko ane me ba se toya yo mara ba kasne ko 매바 소액이 맨로 탑주시네 수고 말와 맞아요. 그래서 하고 내대 하고 그거 말에 내다 하 먹어래 내도 연구 여바 하 먹어래 먼저 미시고데 내디기 긴진 시기 여바 하 먹어라 와 먹어 완전 내디기 아니 거 값 맨쇠디 비슷한 거 말이는 그디나 내디기도 내 캡적 막 어디 그디네 시도에서 책으로 와
If people of course die every day for a variety of reasons, and quite often those reasons may be unknown. But let's say there is a reason for many people dying which is unknown. There's a particular disease that is still unknown in the world. With that disease being unknown, as it carries out its role, people die. But no one is recognizing that people are dying from this disease because this disease is unknown. Moreover, because the disease is unknown, it's not being treated. Moreover, because the disease is unknown, treatments haven't been developed for it. And therefore, no one is being treated, no one is being cared specifically for this disease because it's unknown. So this then is similar.
Zada neemdi lebada hako, neemdi lebada hako, neemdi kinji mimango shigyoba de hako yodu, tadi gyun bachi, no tree, gyun bachi, tadi meva su, mazunda, tanganzulia, gangashu, chigdu, samche, diniza, delia, and neemdile, ngongogue, men sueche, and ne mapagi sungupchea, ne dele tayaki, nazadi, meva suegi. If
this were the case, then certainly what we would want is for, firstly, this unknown disease to become known, to be recognized, and thereafter, being recognized, to be understood. In other words, to be investigated. So if it turned out that there was this hidden disease that was killing people, we would want this to be firstly recognized and then investigated so it could be understood. And with it being understood, what we would want is that treatments would be developed to cure those who are afflicted, as well as techniques to care for those who are afflicted. But for techniques of care and for cures to be developed, the disease has to be investigated. For the disease to be investigated, it first has to be recognized.
lo lai zimba na shin ju yore yo mar se cheba che di li go marwa me ba za an di kien je na zu ta de ba do nyomo kie che ko wal ko te ba di kien di che ba res
Just like with that analogy then, the position that the vast number of beings find themselves in is the objects of negation that we are talking about, they have no concept of this, never once having heard about it. The idea of true existence is unknown, just like it was for us previously. That how phenomena appear to our mind, how every object of thought appears to a mind, is something most people give very little thought to. And certainly the recognition that they appear as existent by way of their own essence, in other words, independent of causes, independent of imputation by mind, is not something that people generally think about. So not being aware of this theory, there is really no chance of people being aware of the appearance of true existence, or not being aware of this philosophy rather. They will not be aware of the appearance of true existence. And therefore they will also be unaware of the role the ignorance that grasps at true existence plays in the generation of the afflictions.
Duge mindu cheba cheche denege zawa gyune nawa na zawa gyune mindu sembege that ngeshi gyegores ngeshi gyegores cheche da dongbege dongbangi de dogores or de ngeshi gyegores tikarasene di nangsu di ngocheba ina da bene denis nangduwa sembe nangsu ngoche lodege dene nawa na shin dene jingduwa sembege jinsu de ngocheba ina hago ba ina dene ko nawa na shin da ko jima na shin duge mindu se cheba che de yongwa ko dakta re mindu cheba che do dene an mindu sembe nge shinye ba da nge shinye ba jung go re che.
Once we've made this identification, it is necessary to generate a conviction in it as well. Once one then has, the meaning here is that once one has come to gain this knowledge of how phenomena appear to oneself, and that they do not exist in this way, the interest should arise. I don't want to be deceived anymore. I've understood the philosophical presentation that phenomena appear to me as independent. I grasp or believe that they do, and this leads to improper mental engagement and afflictions arising and suffering, being causes for suffering accumulated and experienced. I do not want to be deceived by this anymore. I do not want to be deceived by my own ignorant consciousness. I therefore need to investigate this for myself. And that is the meaning then of it is necessary to generate a conviction in it as well. So these 5 words serve to make the point that one should not leave this topic as merely theoretical. One needs to understand the theory well, but then integrate it. And through integrating, one gains a conviction.
Dinigi ngeshi kye kubi kimchen gare labna me shindu yobatar ngombar shenpe diye wangu tsumi ji namdo ane gyasue nyema tar seba mebar chungwa de gobi chidu yinsina. Chizan da ngana zulya dinigi bina gacha de nang ne di takar yore sebi zinje an di wanga garsan tsumi ji namdo pa chik gyatsu nyema na zohai meba liguresi. Gyatsu ki baji nyema sudu gyatsu balabdi zohai gyunyo mara ki na chigyon digurwa. Di na shi, ane ko zohai me digan namdo tsumiji namdo liguresi. Chizan tsumiji namdo zohai meba ledu chakda nyomo badi zohai meba liguresi. Chizan dine ki nyomo ba 매바 까야래 추미지 까고 그래 추미지기 남도디 용야 까발라 데니기 가자 능수디 파 오체 가자디 동바디 오체 또 그래스 디도야게 녀모 빠야게 된다라야 추미지 남도다 디기비 녀모 빠야게 된다라 고에 매바 소야게 된다라 동이 또 그래서 디리 또네 매바 요금 그래서 디리 해서 그래
Coming to understand the theory well, the philosophy well, it's imperative to gain a conviction in that. In other words, to integrate it within oneself so that it can have a transformative effect on how we live our life. How to bring about this determination to generate a conviction is presented in the next sentence. Through clinging strongly to what doesn't exist as existing, discursive consciousnesses of improper mental engagement, inexhaustible like ripples on an ocean, arise. This then is a line to reflect on, because this shows the tremendous fault of remaining ignorant as we are, or remaining under the control of ignorance as we are. And this, through reflecting on this, will give rise to determination to study the philosophy well and integrate it continuously through reflection. Through clinging strongly to what doesn't exist as existing, what doesn't exist is the object of negation, true existence. It doesn't exist. But our ignorance grasps at true existence, or the self as existing truly. So here, we are believing that something that is completely non-existent, has never been found to exist since beginningless time, we continuously grasp at it, believing it to exist in the way that it appears to us. That is ignorant, and that is leading to all our confusion and suffering. And then the sentence continues, discursive consciousnesses of improper mental engagement. So that is the embellishment that thereafter follows, and it follows in a way that is inexhaustible like ripples on an ocean. So here this analogy is being utilized to remind us, just like an ocean the water of an ocean is never completely still. If there are usually waves, and even if they are not, there are always ripples. Just like in our mind, sometimes we have the improper mental engagement is coming one after the other, and it's powerful, other times less so. But our mind is not at ease or at peace. And then we can take this further, and understanding, as we've heard before, that from improper mental engagement come the afflictions. And the afflictions, anger, attachment, pride, etc., are also inexhaustible like ripples on an ocean. So through reflecting on this sentence, we can see why our mind is not at peace, it's not at ease. We are pounded by these oceans of suffering, these waves of afflictions, which arise from their own waves of improper mental engagement, which come from clinging strongly to what doesn't exist as existing.
Dine zada ngao zugi ta gacha di mewan zada ngao zugi semdi ngao zugi semdi tangbo yine ane dine ki kanglai ma to rangwen zhubegi zhubedi zawakini mo zhub manyo waresi denpa zhubegi denpa zhub manyo waresi ngao semdi tangbo yine kiji ina denpa zhub manyo waresi ine maungpa na denpa zhuguri wesin zhugu maresi zhubya gyuneyo maresi ngao sem denpa zhubba sedi kanglai ma to gyudan jin chashi lui pa shabala ma tuba korongwe ne jubtuba demba duba chesa nganzo semde dene rebes zaogine mares zaogine jungyo mar dinaji dine chayo mar maongpa ne chage mares mewa nganzo semde rangshin demba majuba re deres chesa semde ngo rangshin de pe masa zangma sangji gyge semde rangshin da nganzo semde rangshin ila kebra jeyo mares kebra je mewa res mena nganzo semde rangshin di zangma shuji re pe yabu gye mewa re de 이나 될야 녀모바 망보 제제 안에 지 뒤에서 공부한 가게 되니기 망보기 녀모비 망보 tum샤교로 차고래 제가 semji ranshin ti ko ngo tempa tu manyo ware tempa matrupa inzang kangla mato rangwo ni matrupa inzang ne ko yudan kinyi tene ko gyuwa zhu tanya yo ware jesa dine sa ko yara yara tangje sanje kopang tok tuya chaya yo jesa ngana zu gyula semji tamji ge sanje ge kopang tuya rig yo re sayadi ngazu semji ranshin korong tempa matrupa inzang tempe ngo zawa yin tu manyo ware matrupa inzang di ngana zu ge dine semdi sanje kopang drup tuya ge ko sanyo ngo gyur tugo re jere.
Furthermore, as has been mentioned, every object of thought, everything that we think of, whether it's a self, an outer phenomenon such as a material object or sound or taste, or whether we're thinking about thoughts, all of these objects appear to us as being truly existent. But no object has ever existed truly. No object has ever been found to be inherently existent or existent by way of its own nature. Since beginningless time, nothing has ever existed in this way, ever, including our own mind. Any individual mind or our continuum has never, ever existed truly. Nevertheless, when the object of our consciousness is consciousness itself, that object, like every other object, appears to us as being inherently existent or existent by way of its own entity. Yet it does not exist in this way. Our consciousness, this too, is empty of inherent existence. Just like a Buddha's consciousness is also empty of inherent existence. In this way, the emptiness of our consciousness is no different from the emptiness of the consciousness of a Buddha. So here we reflect that because our mind, our continuum, our consciousness is empty of being established by way of its own essence, we can therefore remove or eliminate, eradicate this ignorance that falsely believes all phenomena, including our own consciousness, to exist by way of its own essence. And to the extent that we remove this ignorance, the resulting improper mental engagements and the afflictions weaken and become less frequent, less strong. And eventually, we can eradicate this ignorance, eradicate it completely, so that there are no afflicted minds arising, because the afflictions together with their seeds have been eradicated. And thereafter, their imprints too can be eradicated completely. And therefore, because our mind is completely empty of being established by way of its own essence, just like a Buddha, through realizing this completely, we can also arise as perfect beings. We also can become Buddhas.
Bindo ju dine sa ju dine delia anjik regi dum dege jagi dam den ma jik zaro zoro da dine ke mango shu dam je jik cha sha bena da niga jikba re de ina jik di gyuen gang ge me khorong se u shu ju de wa da khorong we ting ting je ye ba je khorong ge pa we de tu go mi shan da ge tong de we ting di tong go lo wa da jik di ko de ji jik bu jik ya re de di para de ya jik bin juya da sa juya da den na bo juya da de re ge ti ya da de ni ge ja da de mang bo ji ti sha ban za di gi we de pa le de du go ma nga zu pa dan ne we ting de tong go ma de ba di ni de ji ji de we ting de shu ji yong go de ji de be ji ge za ro zo zo ba lo tong de go ro je sa di we ting de yuan de sang yi gi sem da ji ba de 나라서 디 셰고디 디 둠셰고디 나라서 셈디다 지바래 다데네게 나라서 셈디 가르스는 뇽모보 마보고 둠셰고래 사지기디 셈디 뇽모바 바샤다 제바 zangma sui cawa zangma zangye xiewa zangma zangye. Ngā zuki xie di mangpo tumshi ba na jing nyōmo ba da due chao, kongzhuwa, ngā jia, dēni ki mangpo namdo mangpo ki tumshi kiruwa da. Di na jing dati xie di re di pa tsu gili chiyo ko, jik ko, nyi ko, ma ko, chene, dēni ma tubu di ma drap, kāntsam chi lian di ko de sik thongya chi, drap chi de yin la me la thongya chi ruwa. Dēni ma jiki chasang zangma sui, dēni zangma chene, 집에 장마 집지기한 차투고 봐. 어디 나시 가 저기 녀모모 tum제게도 녀모바 림비 마 빵제 녀보디 마 매와 sö베네. 다 저기 셰고 나시 가서 셈디야 세세세 루고 봐. 다 녀모 바샤다 제바 장마 쇠차와네 대시 디 산지게 셈디나 셰고디다 집과 차송으로 봐 거니. 곧 장마 장녀 쇠서네 셰고니 집지기한 차송. 디 나시 가서 셈디 녀모 바샤다 제바 장마 쇠서네 상이 셈 다데 예마가 저기 상이 유게 셈디다 직부치가 장아서 상이 고바 토서 봐 자고라 니나 자고 빼러서
Take as an illustration 2 pieces of glass, and the 2 pieces of glass themselves are identical. The one is completely clean and free of any type of dirt, even the slightest trace. In fact, the one piece of glass is as clean and clear as clear can be. And this here, an analogy, one likens to the mind of a Buddha. The second glass, this, whilst in its nature is identical to the first piece, it is actually quite filthy. It's covered in dust and soil, probably some oil, maybe there's a cloth tied all around it, and then on top of the cloth is mud and maybe more oil. So it's really in quite a pitiful state, and superficially appears very different from the one that is pristine and clear. But we know that faced with this second piece of glass, that with effort, over a sustained period, we can clean it. No matter how filthy it is, if we put in the time and the energy, and if we are skilled, we can clean that piece of glass, and we can clean it and make it as clear and perfect as the first piece. So this is the process with what needs to be done with our mind. The mind of a Buddha, which is likened to this clear glass, has been completely purified of the afflictions, as well as their seeds, so the afflictions cannot arise, and also the imprints or the stains of the afflictions. These too have been eradicated completely, so there is no trace, as if the afflictions had never ever been. That mind is completely pure, perfectly pure. And therefore, all good qualities have been perfectly developed within that mind. Our mind, on the other hand, is still pervaded by the afflictions, the seeds, and their imprints. But whilst this is our current state, the situation is not at all hopeless. Just like with that filthy piece of glass, through applying effort repeatedly over a sustained period, and not just effort, but skill, so that one progressively, in the correct sequence, trains one's mind, one can thereby clean and purify one's mind, just like one applies oneself to a physical task. One works at this with effort, with some enthusiasm, in the correct manner to achieve the desired result. So too with this illustration. Because through this process, in the end, this filthy piece of glass will become as clean and clear and faultless as the first. In other words, our own consciousness can and will become identical to the mind of a Buddha in terms of completely purified of all the afflictions, their seeds and imprints, and all good qualities developed.
Is that Dini ngā 주기 규 라마나리아 규 레미숑나레 ngā 심제 탐제 규라 산지 요고바 되비 리큐어레세데 데네기 안디수 데네 송고르 와치자 데네기 지사 심제 탐제게 산지 고바 톱스기 뉴버디 요레스 지사디 리큐어레세데 안주 규 레미숑나레 소야데 디송고레 규 라마 세 조로 베시제 디나네 가서 심제 탐제 산지 고바 토에기 리큐어레스 Rigore Sungur, which is a rigore said the Jing Sheban Perushe, Din Hashin has Simgir, Sanjiki Simgir Hashin and Simgir Hashin, Kavrachi Yomar Mevanza, Nazu Sim, the and the Sanji Rashin Kava Mevaz and Sanjo Kovan top to you, Nubadi Yore, said Rigore says this Murva.
In the text by Maitreya Sangha called Sublime Continuum, or Tathagata Gaba, there the authors compose that all sentient beings have Buddha potential, Buddha nature. They all have the potential to become Buddhas for the very reason that I've just presented. And that's because our continuums are in nature no different. All of us, here and every living being everywhere, has the potential to become a Buddha. And that is because our continuums in terms of their nature are no different.
And the names are done to dinner there, so her Sungors in it. Just that Dembato Gasha said, Gangla, Matuba, Gudan, Yin, Chashi, Lu Power, Shabala, Gangla, Matu, Rang, when the Druba Mabare, just on the same dear, the near Rang when the Maruba in Zang, and the Garcheva Lana, then the same the Carson. Shenji le dugo is wrong, send the Shenji le dubare. Shenji le duba in the Kin Yahuch Teva no Yahucharugo, because a Kinchi le dune or Yargeta yours. Tis quite as a dinenza, or San Yugo Juaroyer, tis a Juata San Yugo Bato, Chai San Yugo Montoyer, San Yichayores, tis a quite dinging Java, dinging Java, Shan duba in the Shen Kin Yahuchine, and Koya Juatachi, Yahusutu as you were. The Demba drooped over in a Gala Mato, Lu Shabata, Lo Gala Mato, Rang when you drooped over Jina. Could you unit your mother? Then San Yigo, Yavane, Yagadina, Yavare, and King got a tail Yavare. Do I Gadina, Ganad Mato, Yahacha, Mavacha, just a Demba Matuba, Druba in Juata Mavare. Yavone, Gadina, Yavore, do Gadina, do just a Juata Mavacharu. Just an Anzuki. Denigi Meva in the and Dinjin Chawa Jor, Dinjin Chawa Joanza, Madu Yamlenje, Jabache, Com Yaptinjin, and send the Juataja, Tarbatam Juat of 2 years at this Murva.
Therefore, our mind, this, despite when it's our object of thought, despite it appearing as if it is independent, not influenced by causes or needing to be imputed by another mind, despite appearing as if it exists by way of its own essence, it is empty of existing by way of its own essence. It does not exist in the way that it appears. Rather, not being independent, it is dependent. It is mutually dependent, which means it can be and it is influenced by what is other than it. In other words, it can change. It does change. This means our current polluted mind can change. It can be purified. And that is the case for every sentient being, all of us. We can develop our consciousness into the omniscient consciousness of a Buddha. If our mind existed in the way that it appears to us as truly existent, as independent, being independent, it means nothing else can influence it, couldn't change. There would be no causes that could be accumulated to change the mind, because the mind would be independent of causes, not influenced by them. The mind, therefore, one couldn't embark on a process to improve the mind. But this isn't the case. Through accumulating the appropriate causes, the mind not only can be influenced, but transformed, and transformed thoroughly into the omniscient consciousness of a Buddha.
나는 간저게 된다라 니딩기 디기 가르송고도 세나 당하고래 가샤세데 강라에 마도 랑원에 두고 자기는 요 말에 이내 가서 될래 로려야 디니시 가샤디 덴바 두바는 거레스 된나요도 나와나신 다가라 요레 선비 진비로 한기식 진발 한기식 이거래서 하나씩 용거레스 다 진발 한기 디기 겐제제 디기 겐제제 먼저 유로 가래 통외네 안델라 아니 유델라 데 남도 아니 데리아 추미지기 남도 아니 거의 지게 네 그런 의니 술래 마찬바 태와지 조다지 추미지기 남도 기고래지 추미지 남도 기 조다지 의니 술래 하바 조다지 추미지기 남도 기고래지 추미지기 남도 기네 디어도 번에 유델라 상부게 하바 조다지 상 추미지기 상부 답이로 지게바나 안 데라미 빙한 중에 차와지게 돼서 단 수미지 유del이야 안에 냠바 따위게 수미지 남도지 개와이나 안 데라테는 아줄야 유del라 콘로기고 그래서 제가 수미지 남도라 때네 아줄라 콘로기야 다 되셔 인가 야기고 그래서 다 디기어도 아니 디기 견지나 가르치고 그래서는 아니 아주기 지게 량한 바사고 그래서 근데 수미지 남도 계제 아니 지게 차바기 차베 원게 심장 소쇼체야다 아니 샤야 강아제 기여도 니오 량한 바사 아니 콘조 원게 추미지 원 콘조 원게 신 소쇼야다 신의 뉘베 자기도 량한 바사 안 델라티네 량한 바 델라티네 가기고선 개와 치말랑 아주게 땅아 소셔야디 가소레 더 코와리 기고 그래서 코와 기여도 땅 아주게 동아 용화야 되게 찾아다 동아 용화야다 규에 동아 차와두시요 기디나 강아 용화야디 니디신 용고래서 제가도 진행한 저 강아 되게 삼다바이나 유디 가르리오스는 레다 기고 레디야 녀모베 견제 기고래 녀모마디야 추미지를 되네 기고래 추미지디야 자와 다신 마릭바들 되네 기고래서 제가 인자 다신 마릭바디 아주 가장 오트제 아니 될래야 안직 잡았지 가차디 덴바마 동베 동니데 도바이나 데네 추미지기 말에 데네 녀모기도 말에 녀모마데 량한 바사기 말에 량한 바마사나 레기 원고 코알이 기우 말에 코알라 마게나 둥아요요 말에서 그래서 디스 당아서 디링기 다 셰디기 다 조리 디던다 니보 디슨 거래
This morning, then, we've spoken again about the object of negation, true existence, and that every object of consciousness, everything we think of, appears to us as being independent or truly existent. It appears as if it exists by way of its own essence. There's something within the object that makes it what it is. And therefore, being independent and existing by way of its own essence or its own characteristics, it's independent of influence by other minds, or imputation, or causes. Everything appears to us in this way, naturally, continuously, spontaneously, and it has been doing so since beginningless time, despite no object ever at all existing in this way. Every object of thought arises instinctively because of these our imprints since beginningless time, arises as truly existent, or appears to consciousness as truly existent, but doesn't exist in this way. And this is the case if it's the self, the sense of I, or any other phenomenon whatsoever. And from then, the appearance of the object, such as the self, appearing as truly existent, and consciousness of ignorance grasps at it as existing in the way that it appears, as truly existent. Now, from this follows the improper mental engagement, which, as we heard last night and this morning, serves the function of embellishing the characteristics of the object, embellishing or exaggerating the qualities or the characteristic of the object, making it seem more pleasant or more unpleasant than it actually is. And from that then follows attachment, anger, pride, and any of the other afflictions. So the sequence starts with the grasping at the self as existing truly, believing that we all possess this truly existent self. We have our wants that have to be fulfilled. The self needs certain things. And from this then comes attachment. Similarly, the self needs to be protected. This truly existent self needs to be protected. So we repel other things, people or circumstances. Anger arises. And with the arisal of these afflictions, negative karma is accumulated. So for example, wanting to protect this truly existent self, if anger arises towards someone, the mere arisal of anger leads to the accumulation of negative karma. And certainly if that anger is expressed through what we say or what we do, further negative karma is accumulated. And from this negative karma, when those seeds that now have been accumulated ripen, they will only lead to rebirth in samsara. Wherever we are born in samsara, we will continue to experience suffering. We'll suffer physical and mental pain. We'll suffer from being deceived by transient happiness. And we'll suffer from all pervasive conditioning. Today then, we've looked at the sequence. And this sequence we need to get clear that the contaminated karma we accumulate is accumulated under the influence of our afflicted minds. They are resultant in that they have arisen from a cause, improper mental engagement, which embellishes the characteristics of the object. And this itself arises from the ignorance of self-grasping. And therefore, the ignorance of self-grasping or the ignorance of true grasping is the root cause. Being the root cause of all our suffering, we need to identify this. And here again, I refer you to this line, which you can utilize in your meditation. Through clinging strongly to what doesn't exist, discursive consciousnesses of improper mental engagement, inexhaustible like ripples of the ocean, arise. This makes clear why we have no peace of mind, why we continue to suffer and create the causes for suffering. We need to recognize at least in theory, the root cause of our suffering. And then we need to identify it in our meditation, see how objects appear as being truly existent or existing by way of their own essence, as independent. And that is the first step in the meditation to then investigate and eradicate true existence, coming to recognize that no phenomenon is established by way of its own essence. And to the extent that we can give rise to the understanding and then the realization of emptiness, we'll become free of suffering. We'll conclude here for now and then continue where we're finishing this afternoon. And we'll be looking then at the sequence to abandon the arisal of the afflicted minds. And we have time, so if you have some questions, then please feel free to ask.
So the paragraph before the one we're on at the moment, the last line, accordingly, there's a glaring debate there. Accordingly, the objectivations that are found to exist in the since the beginning of this time. Oh, yeah. We would follow then that the objectivation is ever arising.
Okay, accordingly, the object. So, if, looking at the second full paragraph from the top, the last sentence, accordingly, the object of negation has never been found to exist and has been empty since beginningless time. So this follows then that the object of negation is dependent arising. Yeah? Okay.
Because of the word empty.
Because of the word empty. And has been empty since beginningless time. Okay? So therefore the object of negation is dependent arising.
Empty being empty of inherent existence.
Mm.
Geshe Thubten Rabten. Geshe Thubten. Tongpa inza so gacha khorong tongpa de la de gacha khorong yo ma de la go wa ji da den de la ya ma ko gacha de thoma yin ne yue ma nyo wa de ji da tongpa de la de be na nga zu de le ya di du na lang bo chi tongpa de la de lang bo chi de le yo ma de la go wa ji da ko tongpa ni le se ki yo lang bo chi tongpa de la lang bo chi de le yo ma de la go wa ji da de ne gacha de thoma yin ne yue ma nyo ba de tongpa de la de yu ne yo ma de se le go wa.
So the sentence then, accordingly the object of negation has never been found to exist and has been empty since beginningless time. The object of negation has never existed. It is empty of existing. So in the same way that we would say this room is empty of an elephant, in the same way we would say that an object is empty of inherent existence.
Not empty of inherent existence because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all. Okay.
So then the question is, how can something non-existent be empty?
Yeah.
That's the question, yeah? Okay. So the object of negation is said to be true existence, but true existence is also said to be non-existent. So can a non-existent be empty?
And if it is, then that's why I say it's
okay.
Okay.
That's Tongpa said the Meba the Kure. Tongpa said Tongpa Niligo, Tongpa let the Meba la Kurma. Tongpa said.
The word empty means non-existent. So not emptiness, but empty means non-existent. So we can then read this as and has never been found to exist and has been non-existent since beginningless time. So that is the meaning of the word empty.
Tongpa Nilam the Kargos and Gacha, Tongpa de Meva de la Roa, Gacha Tongbigi Tongpa Saturua, Gacha de Meva Tongbigi Tongba, said the Tongba de Tongpa Ni Serkul, Gacha de Tongbe Tongba Lamna Tongpa Ni Gure, Gacha Tongba the Gacha Hora Meva la Gure, Gacha Hora maybe Gali Orson, Shula Tongsa Chiligare, the Tongpa Ni Sigurua.
So the object of negation has never existed, and it never existing is the meaning of empty as opposed to emptiness. So just in the same way as the elephant is empty of being in this room, the elephant has never existed in this room. So like that.
Tongbe Tongba la Gacha di Tongbe Tongba Lamna Tongba Yin Gurua. Gacha di Tongbe Tongsang like Duangazi, the Tongba in Sigurua, Gacha Tongbe, Gacha Demba Druba Tongbi, Tongba de Tongba in Sigurua. Gacha Demba Druba Ga, the Karahaguayos, Pena de la Langbachi, Mindu Labiode, de la Tongsang Jaguayor, Langbachi maybe Tongbachi, the Mare Langbachi maybe Tongbe Tongbachi, Langbachi Tongba, Langbachi Kora Mava Sigurua, Tongba, Kora Mava Segura. That Mava go and Langbachi Tongbigi. 가령어서 똥바시에 델레 똥바지. 똥바디 신이 통고로와. 비네 포바나리아 추 똥바레라도 추고랑 요마레 라비도 디젤 칼로스 나로 똥바디 하고 고로와. 디 똥원이 디나신 가차 똥바레라도 가차 매바레스. 다 가차데 매용도 안 가르소네. 디 가차 디기 똥비기 다 똥바샤시 디 똥바니 세 고고로.
Again, just in brief, the meaning of empty is that something doesn't exist. So just like the room is empty of an elephant doesn't exist in the room. The glass is empty of water doesn't exist in the glass. So in this way, we can see that empty means non-existent, or doesn't exist.
Okay.
Alan?
The inappropriate mental attention, what sort of consciousness does it arise? The inappropriate mental attention. What consciousness is it fixed to? Like not all consciousness, but what is it? Only the minds that generate attachment and pain, or is it other minds as well?
In terms of what follows from it by attached, because it can be attached before and attached after. Does what consciousnesses follow it?
More generally than that.
Well, they're either going to be arise before, at the same time, or after. So it's a question because attached can be preceding or following.
Okay, maybe the question is, does inappropriate mental attention accompany all consciousnesses?
Okay.
No, maybe.
Does inappropriate mental engagement accompany all consciousnesses?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry?
Well, no. Does inappropriate mental attention accompany all consciousnesses? Yeah, that's my question.
bene Geshe Thubten Rabten gore. Dijela yudela mibe tsumiji ki dijela Geshe gore. Ko nyamde lig mare, chungden lig mare. Tsumiji la de nyomo na nyen len ma do nyomo mai ba la nga zu ge ngwe ni zu ge ha gwe di tsumiji kinji tsumiji la na de le ngwe ni su mi tun ba ha ba da wa de ba. Ji zang ngwe ni su di ha gwe na nga zu mi da wa ro ji bene bene nga mo ro ji da ngwe ni zu ha gwe lo de la tsumiji kinji ge ma tsumiji gi ge ma tsumiji ge ba na nga mo de le bene ji ko so re da nga zu di se ora bene delia jungle ma sona goma gyata jiyoba de gyata jiyoba ha go ba lo di chumi ji gi de yo ma de da delia phajo del jozo kala ya goma gyata ma do me ba che delia chumi ji gi gyata ji yo re samje samda ro samda ne deni phini del gyata ji de ngal go gu du sembe sambala chumi ji gyen ji ne gi ge ro ba gyata ma da 하고 간들 취미지 그런 건 요만이요 말해. 연구 말해. 연구 말이지. 계셈 나님 된 거 말해서네. 계셈라 용식이래. 용식이래. 디베네 하바 취미지기 계시네. 델야 안에지 야 초프야 되네 연구로 와. 베네 용식이래.
Improper mental engagement precedes the consciousnesses that follow it, right? So they don't arise simultaneously, but there's a sequence. And it's usually presented in the context of afflictions. So improper mental engagement precedes afflictions. That's the context it's usually presented in, or it's always presented in. But the function of improper mental engagement is that it interacts with the object in a way that is not in accordance with reality. Hence the illustrations earlier of exaggerating the qualities or the faults. So then attachment or anger arises. But if the consciousness is engaging with the object in accordance with reality, then improper mental engagement will not arise. So for example, if you're counting your money and you have $100 and you count $100, no improper mental engagement. But should you in your mind you exaggerate how much you've got, then it's arisen. Okay. So it's usually, or it's always presented in the context of the afflictions, but it doesn't only arise with afflictions, it can also arise with virtuous minds. For example, if one is making offerings, then one may have this virtuous mind of wanting to make offerings, being preceded by an exaggeration in accordance with reality.
Dalai tsumiji se tsikti pishi tangu yuename na hao mo da shung na la gewa deni kiege tsumiji se de pishi tsik na la yuwa ma re pishi tsumiji se de pishi tangu yuename tsumiji se de tsumiji lo se de nyomo kiege jenji ge deni ge labar tabi lo chik la tsumiji lo se ming tagi ma labar tabi lo chasang la tsumiji se de ming tagi sa ma re da gewa se de pishi yuin sebo yuwa ma re ngi samshima de pashe yoma de chesan chumi ji genji de gewa yorbesine pashe de juna la sebus yoma ina denigi ye labar de lo chasan la chumi ji se la gin samares mu.
That being said, I don't recall ever seeing in the text improper mental engagement used in a context other than preceding afflictions. So whilst other consciousnesses may have the aspect of exaggeration or embellishment, and therefore not be in accordance with reality, I've never seen in those instances the term improper mental engagement used. So probably, in my opinion, it would only be used in terms of afflictions, although the aspect of embellishment may well be present with other consciousnesses, such as virtuous consciousnesses, but improper mental engagement wouldn't be utilized, that term wouldn't be used in that context. Okay. So we'll finish there then for this morning. Thank you very much.